Well, it's 5 o'clock, so I think a few more people have joined us for the performance anxiety discussion. And I think Gail and Dawn are joining us for this. So, everybody deals with performance anxiety, and I would invite anyone, if you've got an experience or a question or anything that comes to mind about performance anxiety. How does it affect you physically? If you want to enter that into the chat, and we can kind of take some of those questions and ideas and talk about them. But we do have a handout that I believe has been shared on the website, but I'd love to pass it along to some of my colleagues. One of the biggest things I would say is, trust your preparation, be prepared, and know why you do this. To, quote Lynn's presentation, remember your passion, especially when you start getting nervous and anxious about a performance or an audition, that remembering why we do this can sometimes be a source of comfort. So who else would like to jump in?
I'll jump in just for a second. Sorry.
Okay.
I like to think about performance anxiety in letting go of the things that I cannot control and spending my time focusing my anxiety on the things that I can. So there are a few things that I have to just let go. The weather on that particular day. Now, Joshua was talking about if you're traveling to a different place, that's kind of a different thing. Planning for the weather in your location is one thing, but tomorrow it rains and it hasn't rained for a couple of weeks. My reads are going to be different. I'm going to prepare as much as I can, but I'm not going to worry about the weather because I've done the preparation to be aware of it. But there are some things that I can't control. I can't control maybe people around me. I can't control necessarily traffic. I can leave early, but I'm going to try to make the things that make me anxious, make a list of everything and try to avoid those things as much as possible, but not focus on the things that I can't avoid. So that's kind of where I start with, just kind of letting those things go. And the list that you've provided for us, Julianne, is really great because it's some advice about the things that we can control. So maybe we can just kind of go over that. I know, Jonathan, you wanted to go too.
Yeah, I wanted to say the cause of all performance anxiety is what is known as the fight or flight thing, which is your pituitary gland causing adrenaline to be released through your body. Everybody knows that if they took biology. But what people don't know is that the adrenaline attaches to all the cells throughout your body, and each tissue that you have in your body responds differently. So what does that mean? It speeds up your heart, it sucks oxygen out. But one of the interesting things that it also does is your lip cells, these that make up your lip tissue, change their pressure sensation when there's adrenaline. So what does it mean? It means you don't feel the amount of pressure that you're putting accurately. You feel less. And so that's why people tend to bite and press too hard when they're nervous. Okay. So once you know that, you can say to yourself, because everyone's going to get adrenaline, but you can then outsmart yourself. You say, okay, I can feel the adrenaline, so I know I must be biting a little bit too hard, so I'm going to bite a little bit less. Other people know that when they get the adrenaline rush, some people rush, some people slow down, depends on your personality type. If you're the speed up type, you can say to yourself, I feel the adrenaline, so I'm just going to go a little bit slower than I think. And so you can counteract it. You're never going to get rid of the adrenaline. But if you're one of the people who gets a massive adrenaline rush to the point where you're sweating and sticky and you really screw up a lot, you might need to do what the majority of people do when they take orchestra auditions, which is beta blockers, which prevent some of the adrenaline from attaching. And I had a student who did her thesis on this, and she had this problem where she got so nervous from the adrenaline, she just couldn't function. And so she started taking what's called propranolol, which is one of the beta blockers they do for that, and was able to control it. And after a year or two of doing that, she was able then to get past it mentally, because ultimately it's in your control mentally. But if you have one of those overactive systems, you got to learn how to control it more than someone who has an underactive system. So those are just some general points about the whole thing.
I think that highlights the importance of the mindset behind performance anxiety, I don't think it's not that we try to eliminate it. We learn to manage it.
Right.
And that is different for everybody, because some people have, really high levels of stress activation in these situations, and other people have less. So knowing how you react in those situations is incredibly important, and then utilizing the tools that we're going to share with you to help manage those. And that's going to be different for everybody, but the mindset of management versus elimination is important, because I mean, I get anxious in a performance situation, and I'm trying to learn how to funnel that energy into the performance rather than trying to eliminate it altogether. And just that mindset alone is helpful, because it makes me feel better about my performance. It makes me feel better about the energy and the excitement of the performance. So that's just one management tool. But we can go down this list and just talk a little bit about each of these items. The first one, be prepared. Slow practice over a long period of time. I love that. I love it so much that I even create spreadsheets for myself in my practicing, where I know every day what I need to do. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the previous session about setting goals. I don't need, if I've got 3 months to prepare, well, that never really happens. If I have a month to prepare something, I don't need to play everything up to tempo today. Like, I don't need that kind of stress on myself. I can slow things down, and I give myself the ability to play through things and be accurate without the cognitive overload that can come from trying to do things too quickly, too soon. And then that goes to the next thing, and trust your preparation. I say this to my students all the time. If you have done everything you can to be prepared for the performance, you don't need to be stressed about it, because you've done everything you can do, and you've had help along the way to give you the tools for that preparation. Now, if you haven't done everything, that's a different story. But that doesn't mean you need to be practicing 8 hours a day. That's unhealthy. But if you plan things out and you're consistent over a long period of time, then you'll be shocked at how consistent and accurate your playing can be when it comes time to the performance. I also, in just to kind of put those two together, that preparation, I try to give myself, and I even have in my students have a spreadsheet of all their lessons. And if they have a recital, it has a date for when their recital is, and then it has a countdown of how many days they have for their preparation. But it also has a separate countdown to 2 weeks before. So they know how many days they have until the 2-week mark before their recital. So we aim for that, so that everything is ready to go 2 weeks before. So if there is something that's giving them more trouble, if something, that you just couldn't plan for in your preparation, that's just becoming very problematic, we've got a little bit of a buffer to work on it. And then that 2-week period, we're just working on performance practice, where we can play for people, where we can record ourselves, where we can do the things that we need to do to feel good about playing an entire program, or to play an entire piece, or to play an audition, or whatever it is that we're preparing, so that we can trust ourselves and everything that we've done when we get into the performance.
I just want to jump in for 1 second. I do a similar thing with my students, where we kind of put the 2-week date beforehand. But I also try to get them to think about that date in a positive way, not like dreading the 2 weeks before, or dreading the recital. So if they use the words like, oh, I have my recital, and they make a face, I'm like, we're not going to make that face anymore. we have a recital, all of our family's going to come to see this hard work we've been doing for 4 years, you know? So, so just visualizing the recital is a happy event. Visualizing 2 weeks before as a culmination of hard work that you'll get to share with your studio mates on the way to something amazing. So I think these dates sometimes they start to feel like, oh, it's a burden thing, and we need to think about them as no, this is going to be a wonderful day when I can say I'm ready and I'm done, you know, and that helps me a lot as well, because sometimes the stress of I have a recital, I have a job, I have some family things going on. Sometimes I talk about my clarinet playing not in a positive way, and I have to catch myself and reframe that. I get to play a recital. I'm sharing a really cool work with my students next month, and I kind of talk about it in a way that just doesn't feel dread.
Yeah, it's a celebration of life. It really is. You know, talking about the preparation thing, when you prepare, you can learn notes, right? You can learn how how your hands feel when you're playing the notes. You can learn what it sounds like. You can learn what the score looks like on the page in your mind, and you can feel sort of what the thing feels like. When you get into a performance, again, one of the things the stress hormones do is they cause short-term memory loss in everybody, in me, in Josh, everybody. Okay. So the key is now, if you have a short-term memory loss, very short, like a fraction of a second, you could drop 3/16 notes in a run, right? However, if you have 6 different memory paths to the same thing, you won't drop them. So in other words, if you're playing from memory, or if you glanced away, if you have your rote memory and your intellectual memory of what the solfege was and your memory of what it sounds like and what your fingers felt like, even if you get the short-term glitch in the brain, it still comes out because you have supporting memories. So you need to, when you practice, don't practice one way. Think of all the ways you can imagine and feel the music that you're playing.
I'd like to jump in and add a few things. When Joshua was talking about managing, my professor in grad school suggested that I start running, and made that suggestion because of the idea of being able to control your breath and be able to still be able to cognitively function when your heart is going faster than it normally goes. And so I was just doing the math, like 25 years later, I've done a 5 marathons and half marathons, and I'm running a lot slower now, but I'm still trying to get about 1,000 miles a year, just because it's a great time for me to be with myself and listen to my breathing, focus on breathing in a different way than clarinet breathing, but it still applies the two together. So I recommend physical activity as one way to manage that particular symptom. The one thing that often gets me out on stage, despite performance anxiety, is my love for the music that I'm about to share. And I don't know if we've talked enough about that today, but to me, it's if I didn't love the music I was going to do, maybe I would feel differently about it. But it helps me by putting the spotlight on the music and not on me, because that is really the purpose, is to be able to share that music with the audience. It's not to be evaluated, and it's not about me, it's about the music. And I just find that I value that so highly for myself, and I counsel my students to think the same way.
I agree. I also think that, when we have these big performances, most of the people in the audience, as we've said before, they're there to hear you and they're there to support you. They're in your corner. Even if you're being graded for that, you've probably worked with that professor for a while, and they know if you make a mistake that it's one you haven't made before, so no need to dwell on it. Generally, I kind of actually don't mind the first mistake I make in a recital, because I can go, oh, okay, I made it, and now I can just move ahead and not be worried about it. But I do have some students that when they make the mistake, they have maybe the first time it happens, that just gets worse and worse, because I can tell they're thinking about the mistake that they made. And I like to treat my mistakes like Vegas. It's something happened there, and we're not gonna talk about it anymore. We're gonna move on and not dwell. So I like that note that you had in there, Julianne, about that, because if we can just move past mistakes and realize that every single person on this grid makes them, and understand that, I'm 45, I played clarinet since 6th grade and I squeak every day. That, it's not as big of a deal as it seems in the moment, So we're all human. I love that point you have in there.
Well, it's something I've noticed at different times in my life. The performance anxiety has hit me or not hit me in different ways. And, it's interesting, entering into, I'm not quite 50 yet, but I'm getting there. And I react differently in pressure situations than I did 20 years ago. And I had to learn to acknowledge that. But something I experienced that I had never experienced before, this a couple of years ago in an orchestra concert, right before solo, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't worried about it. I got dizzy. The room started spinning. I had never experienced this in my life. And I started taking some very deep breaths, and somehow just the rehearsal, the practice took over, and I was able to make it through the solo. And then later I turned to my colleague next to me and explained it, between the pieces. And she goes, "Oh yeah, it happens to me all the time." And, so it's acknowledging maybe we change throughout our lives, and our reactions to performance anxiety. We may have it a little bit more later in life or earlier in life or different times, depending on the preparation and the situation. So just acknowledging that and being able to learn techniques to work through it. And so whether that's breathing or, just the mental, positive reinforcement, hey, you're going to do this, you've got this, this music, taking that moment to give yourself that self-talk, not the negative self-talk that we all, you're going to screw, no, don't even go there. Just move, like Dawn said, move to those positive self-talk and self-reinforcement.
And research shows that the positive self-talk actually makes a difference. And so does negative self-talk. So it's like free help.
Bananas are good too.
Huh?
A banana is good too. It suppresses it. It's a natural beta blocker. If you have a banana before you go on stage.
I heard an interesting thing about eating. So one of our fight or flight things is that our digestion slows, right? So some people can't eat before they play for that reason, because if they eat, it just sits there and they really can't do it. But if you haven't eaten maybe enough that day and you try to eat something right before, your body's not going to get those things to you in the right way, because the fight or flight is, it's a survival instinct. All of these things were to keep humans alive on this planet while we're with whatever animal was chasing us, right? So I like the banana thing, but I have to remind myself that I need to get that in my body like an hour before. And if I wait too long,
right,
the banana won't work for me because my body's not gonna accept it. Also, my body is very susceptible to like sugar that I have. So I have to not have sugar right before, because I can feel it coursing through me. So, once you figure out, and you're only going to figure this out by playing in public similar to your recital, once you figure out some of these things, you can work to avoid them. But, I like the banana, but maybe 45 minutes to an hour beforehand.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this all comes back to like management, where we figure out what works for us. This I'm looking at this handout, number 10, how to prepare for a performance audition. Get good rest. How much sleep do you need to feel not groggy, but also well rested? For me, that's like 7.5 hours. That's super rare that I can actually do that. But if I can, before a big performance, especially like a full recital, I will try to get between 7 and 7.5 hours of sleep. If I get more, I know that I'm groggy. If I get less, I know I'm probably not optimal. Eat well. If bananas help, try to eat bananas. But as Dawn was saying, and what you were saying, Dawn, actually fully applies to me as well. I cannot eat right before a performance. I don't want to eat right before a performance because I don't want to salivate too much because I just ate, and I'm not hungry. I don't want to eat. So I make sure that some around 2 hours to an hour and a half before a performance, I have my very typical peanut butter and jelly sandwich on Dave's bread. It's very hearty. I get my carbs, I get a little bit of sugar, and I get a little bit of protein, but mostly I get carbs because I'm about to do something that will burn a lot of energy. I'm probably going to be like warm up on stage wearing, like a suit or something. So I need to have energy that I can burn. And, coming from, if you look at it from an athletic standpoint, if you're going to, Gail, for example, if you are going to prepare for a marathon, you're probably going to load up on carbs the night before and have carbs with you because you can burn them really, really quickly. So I try to have a lot of carbs before performance because I know that works for me, to make sure that I have plenty of energy to get through the program without feeling tired or like I don't have enough energy to get all the way through. Hydrate. We live in the desert. We have to drink like water all the time. And on a performance day, it's even more important because you're not going to want to take any water in. You're not going to want to drink. You're not going to do anything like that. Also, you need to be careful with, coffee, for example, because coffee tends to be a diuretic and eliminates water in your system. So I try to minimize how much coffee I have. Also, for the caffeine side of things, as Don was mentioning, that sugar can make her too excited. Caffeine can do the same thing for me. So if I have too much coffee, I'm too jittery to do anything. And then practice the day of the practice the day of the event before the day of the event. That means if I'm doing a 2:30 recital on Sunday, which is pretty much whenever I do a faculty recital, on Saturday, I'm going to run my program at 2:30. I'm going to try to put myself in the performance context as much as possible. I may even eat the same thing beforehand. I may try to get the same amount of sleep. That's rare that gets to happen, but you try to mimic as much as you possibly can, so that when you get to the performance, you know exactly what's going to happen, because it comes back to management. If everything that happens is predictable, you can find tools to help you manage those symptoms as much as possible so that you can be optimal for your performance.
One story comes to mind that I heard about Jascha Heifetz and his performance. And the story goes, who knows if it's true, but the story goes, is someone asked him, Maestro Heifetz, how is it that you can play everything so fast? And he said, I never play fast. And he said, what do you mean? You're one of the fastest players of all time, right? He said, no. He says, anything that I play in a concert, if it's marked 150, I'll practice it up to 180. If it's 160, I'll practice it up to 190. Whatever it is I'm doing in the concert, it's much slower than what I've gotten it up to. So that when I'm in the concert, it always feels slow, actually. So that is something that not only applies to speed, it applies to dynamics. Remember the pressure thing I was telling you about the lips, it also applies to the tips of your fingers. When you squeak in a concert, it's usually because you're pressing too hard, either with your mouth or your fingers or both. And when you are running out of air, your brain starts to think you're going to die. So that makes you nervous. And that also causes you to forget things. So what you want to do in a concert is, when you get the adrenaline, back off from the edge of what you've done by 5 or 10%. Now, the edge, you might want something to be really fast. Okay, then practice it at 170 and get it up to 170, and maybe you only do it in the concert at 155 or 160. But then the problem people get into is they don't realize they're going faster or pressing harder, or the triple forte. Yeah, okay, we want that triple forte for that one spot, right? Okay, but then you get in the concert and you squeak it out and it's horrific, right? So make it a triple forte minus in the concert. Back off a little bit, because you're probably doing more than you think you're doing in the concert. So if you take a little bit off the edges of everything, then you can get through and be under control. And in the end, you listen to it later and you say, wow, oh, that was plenty fast. Oh my God. And you thought you were going slow or something, right? So it's that, just take the edge off a little bit.
I have a student who has a recital coming up, and when they get nervous, they kind of lose their breath. And so what we've been doing is there's stairs that lead up to my office. We'll purposefully send the student to go do the stairs 3 or 4 times and then come back and play the most challenging section. And you can't stop, right? And just like you have to deal with those stairs right now and kind of get used to it. And to be honest, I need to do that myself right now because I'm coming back from a period of time where I didn't play. And so my nerves, I'm kind of forgetting that feeling too, my first performance back. But I think it's really helpful to force your body maybe into some of these things and then just practice dealing with them. So so that you remember what it feels like when your lip gets a little quivering or your hands are shaking a little bit. You maybe try to find an opportunity for that to happen to you. But I'm really glad that we're talking about this because it happens to every single one of us still to this day. So I just want everyone listening to know that it's really normal. And I'm really glad that over the past 20 years, it's become very healthy to talk about these concerns that we have and to commiserate about performance anxiety like this. So thank you guys for chatting with us today.
Always have a fallback plan too. You can learn how to do things, like you can learn how to circular breathe, which will help you if you're running out of breath. But circular breathing doesn't always work exactly the same in concert as when you practiced it. So especially if you're getting tired physically or mentally or whatever. So you want to have a fallback. You say, okay, I think I can do it like this with the circular breathing and I'll be comfortable. But in case I might breathe here or here, again, have a plan. If you have a plan, it makes you feel better and it makes you more reliable, Are there any questions here in the, let's see, limit coffee? Yeah, too much coffee. I drink too much coffee, but on a performance day, no, because you don't want this.
I also have to limit dairy. I've found over the years because you get really dry and kind of clammy.
Yep.
I found on performance days, I reduce, if I'm having a lot of dairy, I just avoid it.
I don't know Dave's bread, but I'll have to try it. I guess it's good.
It's amazing.
Let's see what else is here. I like to play through the recital, time of day. Yeah. Yeah. And I think someone said it already, but once you get there, it is what it is. And so you have to forget everything. It doesn't matter. All the troubles that you've had leading up to that, they're all in the past. And you just say, okay, this is going to be whatever it's going to be, and I'm going to have a good time.
Yeah, I also like Julianne's marks about accepting everyone's congratulations. Sometimes, we're thinking about how it went and we think about all the things that went wrong, but everyone there is just thinking about all the things that went right for you and they want to share those with you. And I try to also make my students understand that being able to accept the congratulations for the job well done, it's an important factor, and it just helps you build your confidence in what's going on. If you're too in your head about what you just did and you're not able to hear what your teacher's giving you in the feedback, it's kind of a cycle. So I like that that's in there too. And thanks so much, Julianne Doyle, for putting that hand out together. I think it's really helpful. I wish more people would talk about it with their high school students and their middle school students, long before the actual event happens, that we just kind of acknowledge that these are just daily things that we have to deal with. So